Hi, loves, and welcome to the With Love Always podcast, a podcast to help you live the life you were created for. We are your hosts and your friends, Bree
and Marissa,
and we're so grateful you're here.
We pray you listen and leave feeling more inspired, encouraged, and uplifted.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. We are so grateful, as always, that you are tuning in to this conversation today and joining in on the friendship. For today's episode, we are going to be talking about suddenlies. And if you happen to tune in to one of our previous episodes about feeling stuck in your life, I feel like this episode is a beautiful encouragement and follow-up to that conversation. So if you did listen to that conversation, I pray that this is a continuation. And if you didn't, essentially what we shared in our first conversation of feeling stuck is just the feelings that we all encounter in our life of feeling like we are going absolutely nowhere. We feel lost. We feel unsure. We're waiting on unfulfilled desires. We're waiting on answered prayers. And in today's episode, that is where we want to introduce the idea, the beauty, and the momentum behind your all of a sudden moment, when everything that you've been hoping for, everything that you've been wishing for, the things that feel stuck in your life, all of a sudden everything can change. And we want to share some stories of encouragement, some perspective of hope, and just really introduce this idea of how God really does work in suddenlies in our life. And because of that, we are so anchored and so encouraged to speak this light and speak this hope in the journey of whatever you are waiting for in your life. So with all that said, I cannot wait to dive into our all of a sudden moments in this episode. This conversation is so, like I mentioned, for the person who maybe is currently feeling stuck and looking for an extra element of hope and belief in the promises that are to come. And truly the heart with every single thing that we speak on this podcast is through the lens of our personal experience. And I remember when we were discussing the episode of feeling stuck, that was coming from a place of like truly feeling like I was in the midst of all of those emotions. And what inspired this episode is a recent story, even in my life, of a all of a sudden moment where God literally made me unstuck in an area that I felt like I was forever going to be frustrated in and forever saw no prospects in. And that is what really inspired the heart behind this episode. And with everything, if God can do it in our lives, if God can transform our narrative or bring a blessing or introduce a promise or provide hope in the midst of something that feels hopeless, then he can do it for you. And so something that I have always, spoken over areas of my life that I've been stuck in is truly the belief that God works in suddenlies. And I don't know if that's something that a lot of people think of. I remember the first time I ever heard that years and years back, I was like, whoa, that thought and concept honestly really astounded me. Mm-hmm. And I think anyone who's listening, we have all experienced a moment where it feels like out of nowhere, suddenly something happens in your life.
Yeah.
Whether it's for good, whether it's for hard, whether it's for beauty, whether it's for challenge. We've all been in a moment where we're like, how did everything just change in a complete instant? And I think the beautiful part of the suddenlies in our life is that if it's happened before, it can happen again. Whether it's something you're waiting for, like a blessing over your career, or whether you're waiting for a blessing in your singleness, or whether you're waiting for that one lingering thing in your life to change, or something to transform, or something to move, whatever it is, we all have something that is so fixated in our mind that we are just hoping and wishing and waiting to feel unstuck in. But the belief is, in the midst of the seasons of feeling stuck, is to believe that your suddenly moment is on its way. And that is something that I would always put in my back pocket with absolutely everything. Whatever I was thinking on, whatever I was frustrated in, whatever I've been holding so close to my heart of feeling like, is this ever going to change for me? Always carrying the belief, even when I didn't fully believe it for myself, that, you know what, Bree? Suddenly, everything that I'm hoping for could come. And suddenly everything that I feel like is impossible to happen can happen. And I'm just going to live my day in, day out with the complete belief. And sometimes the complete belief comes from a place of really forcing yourself to try to believe it because you might not logically believe it. But if in my heart and in my spirit, I can even just speak and profess, you know what? I'm frustrated. I'm longing for more. I'm wondering what's going to happen next. I'm so confused. I'm so stuck. But I'm going to persistently speak and believe that all of a sudden, one day, this area I'm stuck in will change and God will move because He has done it before and He will do it again.
Yeah, I feel like something we talk a lot on this podcast about is how being in your 20s, it can feel like a lot of in-betweens and a lot of just like waiting on that promise. And I think what's so neat, what we've seen like time and time again in our lives and in our friends' lives is just right when it feels like you're about to lose all hope, or right when it feels like things are just not going to come together, or God has just forgotten this one area of your life, that's oftentimes where just in a moment, in an instant, truly in a day, you can wake up the next morning and your life can just change. And it feels so sudden, but there's a lot of waiting and a lot of preparation. And I think a lot of just like nurturing your heart in that process. But I think in this episode, we really just want to affirm that, like, just to remind anyone who's feeling stuck that it will be so worth it. Your breakthrough is going to come, and it's going to come in an instant. And we are just like so believing that, and truly just want to like share our stories of times we've seen that happen, because we know that that is God's character. And if He's done it in the past, He's going to continue to do it. So we know how challenging it can be and how, I think, discouraging it can be, especially if you feel like you're seeing breakthroughs in everyone's life and you're just waiting on yours. We just really want to combat that lie and just truly profess and encourage to you guys that you will see a breakthrough and it will happen suddenly. And that is the way God works, is all these little pieces come together and you just, in an instant see it all fall and start to make sense. And it's just so beautiful.
That's so good. And I normally never like read things directly off of our like podcast outline, but I actually want to read to you guys something that I wrote when I wrote this episode, because I think it was something that was so fresh and so top of mind when I was writing this. And I was, like I said in the story time that I will be sharing in just a moment, it was like the emotions and the feelings of truly the heart behind this episode. And I think something that, I mean, transparently, sometimes Marissa and I even struggle or like wrestle with when we're sharing a podcast episode is this a new concept? Like, is this actually going to be a blessing to someone? Like, is this actually something that is going to inspire hope and encourage you guys? Is this a new perspective? And I think sometimes even for us, like, because we've been carrying a certain perspective or certain hope in a certain way for so long, that sometimes I forget that, you know, I pray there's someone out there who truly is all of a sudden encouraged by the concept that God works in suddenlies. And I don't want to dismiss and not like use my voice and use my experience and use the stories that we are going to share to hopefully and encourage and provide a fresh outpouring and perspective over you. And so I'm just going to read this because I actually wrote this as like the intro, and I feel like it'll just continue to drive home the heart and the concept of all of a sudden. So I wrote, this episode is for anyone that feels like they're stuck or not seeing movement in specific areas of their life, whether that's unfulfilled desires, a waiting season, hardships, question marks. Sometimes we become so convinced that our circumstances will never change, our promise will never be delivered, or that this is just how it will always be for us. And if there's anything we have seen in our lives and want to encourage in yours is that God works in suddenly. And all of a sudden, everything could change for you. Everything could work out in your favor. The promise could arrive. The prayer could be answered. The person could walk into your life. You could get the job of your dreams, but you have to maintain the hope in the process to see the fulfillment of the promise. Mm-hmm. And I share that too because another really beautiful part of this conversation is not only the belief that God works in suddenlies and he wants to do that in your life, but it's truly the perspective that we maintain in the midst of waiting for our suddenly moment. Mm-hmm. And that is truly like the overarching hope, because we even mentioned this in our Stuck episode, is that more time in your life is actually in those seasons of the in-betweens, just like Marissa said. Yeah. It is waiting for the promise. It is hoping for the promise. It is anticipating the promise. It's not being able to see what's happening next, but it's truly like, which perspective are you maintaining in your heart as you are waiting for the belief that your all of a sudden moment is coming? And something that I really actually want to share in my story time, and really the story that inspired this episode and this conversation, is my story of singleness. And so,
guys, this is good. I am so excited.
It's literally crazy. And maybe by the time this episode goes live, if you guys follow me personally, you might already know the news, but I am no longer single, which is the most...
I feel like we need confetti.
I know. Like a clapping noise.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm no longer single. And that is like the craziest thing to say, that I have a boyfriend. And wow, yeah. Like, you say that out loud is like the craziest thing in the whole world. But the reason why this story is so, what I pray is so encouraging of the all of a sudden moment, is because my story is something that was crafted 10 years in the making. If not, I mean, my whole life essentially. But my story of having hope in the midst of waiting for my suddenly was having hope for 10 years of singleness. And some of you guys listening are like, absolutely not. That sounds like horrible. And trust me, like when I say that out loud, I'm like, wait, wow, that's been a long time. It has been a long time. My last relationship was literally 10 years ago, which is insane. But I share that to say that, and this can be a whole entirety other story time, like dedicated to singleness, but I share this with the perspective of the all of a sudden moment. In my 10 years of singleness, I not only denied, I guess, others, but I denied myself of things that I thought would temporarily satisfy what I really ultimately wanted. Mm-hmm. I said no to dating different people. I let go and release circumstances and situations and possibilities of relationships that didn't really serve me. And I felt discouraged. I felt disheartened in moments, but I also continued, even in the midst of what felt like failure after failure after failure, what felt like so many almosts, but not quites in my life. It really felt like, okay, God, when is this going to happen for me? Like, when is this actually going to work out? When is it going to be actually perfect? And what I've been looking for and what I've been praying for in the midst of all of those emotions that have been wrapped up in 10 years, which I could never even explain the depths of, because I think the quantity of time explains and speaks for itself. But even in the face of so many lows and highs and in-betweens in my singleness, I continued to persist forward in hope. And I continued to believe year after year, season after season of my life that, you know what? It's been 2 years, but I'm believing and waiting for my suddenly moment. It's been 5 years and I'm still waiting and believing for my suddenly moment. It's been 7 years and I'm still believing and waiting for my suddenly moment. And even as of this year, it has been 10 years since I have been in a relationship. And even though the quantity of time does not make sense for me to believe that there would be a hope, which sounds kind of dramatic, but I still believed 10 years in the waiting that my all of a sudden moment was on its way. And that, even in the midst of discouragement, even in the midst of low points, even in the midst of almost accepting a counterfeit blessing to what I really wanted, I continued to persist forward in the belief that my suddenly moment was on its way. And I share that to say that your all of a sudden moment is not going to always equate to a quantity of time. Because if I were to tell someone, and maybe even you guys listening, okay, 10 years of waiting and now you're telling me all of a sudden you're dating someone, that doesn't feel like an all of a sudden. And you know what? You're kind of right. Like, it has been a waiting process and it has been a journey, and there has been a quantity of time that has been attached. But the all of a sudden and the beautiful moment comes when the blessing arrives in a way we could have never expected. When the blessing arrives in a way that is so specific to the prayers that we have longed for and asked for and petitioned for. And the all of a sudden moment isn't necessarily wrapped in a quantity of time, but truly in the quality and the beauty of the blessing that we are met with. And so I share that to say, just because whatever you're thinking about right now in this moment of like, oh, I really want to see this shift. I really want to see this change. I really want to see something move, but maybe an all of a sudden moment isn't for me because it's been X amount of time and it's been too long. I've been waiting for far too long for this to be an all of a sudden moment. Maybe that's just not my story, but trust me when I say that that is not true. Because like I said, the quantity of time that you're waiting for your all of a sudden moment doesn't take away from the power of how suddenly everything can shift and change. And like I said, I've been single for 10 years, and the hope that I've continued to persist with in the midst of frustrations and everything is truly the only thing that sustained me. And my all of a sudden moment came within a month of all of a sudden, through a mutual friend, I met my now boyfriend, and then week over week, within the span of 1 month, we met from meeting for the first time, going on our first date, going on like a second date, and then becoming boyfriend and girlfriend. And it happened so fast at such what felt to me such an accelerated timeline that is my all of a sudden moment. And the details of our story is so special and something I'll save and reserve for another time. But yeah, the hope that I maintained truly is what allowed me to embrace and see the quality of the gift of my all of a sudden moment.
And I think even something I want to speak into with that, and why I just feel like you are the perfect person to talk about singleness. And I always loved hearing your perspective, because it honestly was so encouraging, even though being married, like walking with so many close friends who are in a season of singleness. And I hear the language of like, I just don't think I'm ever going to find my person, or it's always just going to be this hard. And they would get close to something and then it would just leave them feeling more hopeless and discouraged. And I feel like you would catch little glimpses, like you were still going on dates. You would meet really great guys, but you would just know like, I love these qualities. That was an awesome experience. I'm getting closer to my person. Like, I can't wait to see what God has in store. And you always maintained so much hope throughout that whole process, even in moments where I was like, I don't know how she's doing it. Like, I feel like it's so tempting to just like expedite the blessing. And I know we've talked about the concept of like, you accept those counterfeit blessings, but I think it's just so beautiful when it's like, you didn't have to scramble or make something happen or pull all of these pieces together. You truly just literally in the matter of weeks, like God just brought this person into your life. There was so much peace. There was so much beauty, so much preparation and intentionality from you guys as individuals to then come together. And it's just been so much fun to watch. So I'm excited for you guys to get to hear like the full extent of that. But I really hope in whatever area you're praying over, whatever's coming to mind, I know even there are like areas in my life where I'm like, God, I want breakthrough in this. Like, I've been praying for such a long time. Like, when is it coming? And honestly, it's been so nice as we've started talking about this. Like, it's bringing back the hope and the excitement of all of those times where God has proven his character. And it's felt like forever in the moment. But I know in a month, even in a month ahead right now, I'm probably going to look back and all of those things I'm aching. A lot of them are probably going to have momentum forward. I think there will be suddenlies. I also think there will be some that I'm still going to have my suddenlies yet to come. But I just hope that whatever that area is, whether it's singleness, your job, whatever it is that you have stirred up in your heart and you're envisioning, like, I hope what we're sharing can just bring a sense of just hope, because I think that's the most important thing to have in suddenlies is, like you said, it's not attached to a certain amount of time, but it is attached to us maintaining that perspective so that we can wait so well, so we can receive it, for God to just orchestrate everything together in his perfect timing. And we didn't even see all the details come together, and it just happens, and we just get to receive it.
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful, because I think the word, and I don't know if you use this word exactly, whether it's over singleness or absolutely anything, but it's like, I think we're so prone as humans to feel despair. We're so quick to just believe like we are in this desolate place, and they're like, we feel despair. We feel like there's no hope, and we feel empty, and we feel frustrated, and we sit and embrace those feelings more because they're accessible to us. Honestly, like, it's accessible for us to feel bad about our circumstances, which we should sometimes. Like, that is very valid, but it's easy for us to sit in this place of frustration and no hope and loss and mourning of where we're at. And it actually requires something of ourselves to be like, no, I'm not going to allow this to be the only narrative that I believe. Like, it requires effort, and it requires retraining your mind, retraining your perspective, finding the silver lining and things that are not working in your favor, and being like, no, God, this is greater evidence that you are going to do something greater than I can possibly fathom. My attempts to reach for something that is not for me are failing. And so because of that, I'm believing that you're actually protecting me and guardrailing me for what the blessing will actually be. Whether that's a rejection letter in the mail, or whether that is a failed relationship, whether that is, fill in the blank, whatever it is that feels like a present frustration or pushback or setback or rejection, frustration, if things are just not happening when you're trying to put momentum forward, it's not because you're a failure, and it's not because God wants to keep you stuck. It's because he is literally like guardrailing you to make sure that you are being guided towards what is actually for you. And I think the moments in our life that actually produce the most despair when we're feeling stuck is when we kind of try to jump over the guardrail, and we're like, no, I'm still going to go after this one, and I'm still going to pursue this blessing and this job and this person and whatever it may be. There's infinite blanks or infinite things that can be filled into that blank. And those are the moments, at least in my life, if we want to continue talking about singleness, where I've allowed myself to get hurt even more when I've jumped over literally the hurdle. And
that's so good.
Yeah, I just feel like that is where hope has to be an anchor. And it's going to, like I said, require something of you. It's not going to come easy. It's not going to come first. It's not going to come natural. It's going to require you to literally be willing to find what may feel like it doesn't exist. Find the hope that doesn't feel like it exists. Find the lesson that you don't inherently see. Find the belief that your circumstance do not reassure, and believe that and adapt that and really claim it as your own. Because I could talk forever about that, but like, truly, your perspective will shape everything. And it will also shape what I believe the level of the blessing as well. Like, if you feel despair and you believe like, I'm so desperate for just this area of my life to be moved, you will accept anything that hints at what you want. You will accept any sort of version of the blessing, even if it's a lesser version of what you actually want. If you are coming from a place of despair, you will accept the counterfeit. You will, go bars and bars lower than what you're actually hoping for. But when you are having hope, you continue to persist in that hope, and God really does build an endurance in you of like, you know what, if I've been waiting this long, I can wait even longer if that means I get the very best of the best. And I think that's a beautiful thing that at least it's produced in my character over areas of my life I felt stuck in. Is the longer I wait, it wasn't the more despair that I felt. It was the more perseverance, the more endurance that I actually had to continue to wait. I felt strengthened by the wait. I felt strengthened by my hope. I felt strengthened by nothing working out, because I was like, wow, God, if things are still not working out for me, that means what you have is going to be so freaking good that you have to make me wait even longer, because you're preparing it even better than I can imagine. And like I said, that's a perspective that does not make sense. Our world is not going to affirm that for you. But we pray that in this conversation, we can affirm that for you. Like I always say too, I really believe the areas of our life we're frustrated in the most are the areas that will be blessed the most.
Yeah.
And I even feel that in my story of my singleness, of an area that someone could look at me and think 10 years of singleness, being 28 and unmarried, whatever it is, like how could you actually have hope in the midst of what is to come? But for me, it's like, no, God has been holding out, because he's been preparing something for me that would be above and beyond what I could have ever fathomed for myself. And that's proven true over this one area of my life, and definitely others as well. So yeah.
That reminds me of the verse in Hebrews. I remember when I was actually waiting for the job I'm in now, and I think I had like 6 months of waiting. Well, I'd been waiting in my previous job, and I was like, God, I need a breakthrough, like get me out of here. All of a sudden that happened, but there was no job yet. And it was like 5 or 6 months of truly just waiting and praying and being like, I'm not going to settle for anything that you don't have in store for me. Like I could force a job, and I'm tempted to do that, but instead I'm going to wait on you, and you're going to prepare something that is so aligned with my gifts, my purpose, and it's going to be in your perfect timing. All that to say, that's like the job I'm in now and being in ministry. And I just remember like reading in Hebrews, specifically chapters 10 and 11, and it talks about like patient endurance is what we need now so that we can continue to do God's will and receive all that he's promised. And I just was like, God, renew my mind, give me hope, do not fill me with despair. Each day I wait, like increase that hope. I think it's so tempting, like everything in our mind is going to say each day you wait, you should believe less and less. You should doubt God more and more. You should lose hope. And we are saying resist that urge, and with each waiting day, increase your hope and pray for increased hope, because that is where God, and it just, and I think chapter 11 just lists all of the people in the Bible, and it's like, by faith, they waited and they experienced these beautiful blessings. And I'm like, I want to be a by faith person where it goes so beyond what the world looks at, so beyond some limited measure of time. And it is just me every morning getting up, believing that God is going to continue to remain faithful in my life. And he is preparing the things for me. I can't mess them up. And it's in his absolute perfect timing. And suddenly I'm going to look back and I am going to be arrived at that blessing. And it's just going to be so worth it. It always is.
That is so good. I love that so much. I feel like, that just is the hope that we so pray we can instill in you guys in this conversation. And I think that just kind of takes me to the next line of thought in this conversation. And it's truly to trust the track record of God. Trust what he has done before in your life and believe he will do it again. And I feel like that's one of those concepts that we're all like, yeah. Like, I hear you. I've heard that.
Yeah.
But it's like, do you believe that? Like, do you actually believe that if he's done it in my life, he can do it in your life? If he's done it in Marissa's life, he can do it in your life. If he's done it in your own life, he can do it again. Like, that's not a hard lift for the power of who our God is. And I think regardless, it's like we have all experienced a suddenly moment. I know it without a shadow of my doubt. Whoever is listening, you can think right now, if you really meditated on it, whether it's a big grand moment or something so small where you were like, whoa, that came out of nowhere and that was amazing in my life. Or even suddenly moments sometimes are challenges that we are embracing in our life. Like, it is a dance with both, a harmony of both, because we are human and we will experience a lot of beautiful suddenlies as well as a lot of hard suddenlies. But we all know the feeling of what it's like when something changes everything for us. And I think just trusting the track record and not just only trusting your own. Like, I do believe that is where the beautiful gift of this friendship right here, as well as maybe the people presently in your life, if you are being a witness of something moving and transforming and working out in the favor for someone else, or having recollection and memory of that happening in your life, holding on to that deep belief of, you know what, nothing is too impossible for it to happen again. I think the most beautiful thing that we can do as humans is remain in remembrance. And I use that word with so much emphasis because I think as humans, we naturally are so consumed, as well as I am, by our present life, our present circumstances, and we're always thinking ahead. But sometimes I do think there's a beauty in looking behind you, looking at the past, looking at what has been done before, looking at what has been done for others, and using that as a source of extra anchoring hope that it can be done again. And it can be done again in a different way, in a new way, in a fresh way, but in a way that you can count on. And I think there's times, where I've seen God work in friends' lives. And I'm like, okay, if this has happened for this friend, you know what? God loves them so much, but he also loves me so much that if I'm willing to be moved by someone else's story versus feeling despair or jealousy or lesser than, if I'm willing to be moved in celebration of what God has done in this person's life over here, that is the exact hope that will sustain you to be willing to wait for the movement and the hope and the transformation in your own life. And I think the more that we can continue to hold on to that hope, hold on to the belief in the suddenly, but also trust that it can happen again, that there is literally nothing too impossible to be duplicated again in your life, in someone else's life, that is going to be a perspective that will carry you forward through the moments when you feel that despair, when you feel your humanness settling in, when you feel your circumstances not affirming that your suddenly moment is coming on its way, but it is. And I know for myself, like, that is also one of those beliefs that I would just speak amongst all the other beliefs I've shared with you guys of, believing that God works in suddenlies, but also literally I would repeat to myself, I'm like, Brie, trust the track record, trust it will happen again. And don't lose sight of that, even when your circumstances don't affirm that. Because I think that's the one thing, and we've encouraged so much in this episode, is that what God is doing is not always going to perfectly align with what you can presently see. And I always think about it this way. It's like when you go to a play, like, you don't see what's happening behind the curtain. You don't see everyone moving around and everyone changing their outfits and putting on a different costume and the set is being transformed. But then suddenly the curtains open and it's a completely different setup with completely different characters or completely different outfits. And I think that's how God works so often, more often than not, is suddenly we have this beautiful production, but the curtains close and it feels dark and the theater is black. Your life feels like despair. You feel stuck and you're just waiting in that like intermission. And you're like, when is the curtain going to open again? And then it does. and it's completely different. And it's completely different in the most beautiful way, in a way that moved you forward and progressed you forward. And I think the world will affirm and tell you otherwise. The world will tell you that if you're not seeing momentum, if you're not seeing things move or shift in front of your eyes, then nothing's happening. But God says otherwise. He's like, what I'm doing in secret and what I'm doing truly unknowing to you is something that is so beautiful, that God is literally working when you aren't even working towards something yourself. And so, yeah, trusting the track record, I cannot emphasize the beauty and the power of that enough. So the final just token of hope that we want to share with you guys is the verse Jeremiah 29:11. And it's a popular verse, but I always say verses are popular for a reason. So whether you've heard this 1,000 times or maybe you're hearing this for the first time, I pray that it can just tie together this beautiful picture of the hope in your suddenly that is to come. And the verse reads, "For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope." And I think that is something that, like I said, maybe you've heard that verse 1,000 times, but maybe this is your first time ever hearing that. Regardless of where you stand, I cannot emphasize enough how much God has a future crafted for you, one of beauty, one of hope. He has your future held in his hands. And in any given moment, your all of a sudden moment can come. Like I said in the beginning, and like I want to end on this, anything that you feel frustrated in, the things in your life you feel like aren't changing, the things that feel stuck and unmoved, God wants to transform for you in his beautiful timing. And do not allow the ways of the world, the circumstances you are enduring, to discourage you from the hope that is to come, because God does want to provide you glimpses of hope in the waiting, and he wants you to trust him as you are just anticipating the suddenly. So be someone who believes in faith that your suddenly moment is on its way, even when no one else is believing that for you, even when the evidence around you isn't supporting that. Believe so deeply that it's coming, because if he's done it in our lives, he will do it in your life, and he will do it again and again and again and again. So I just pray that this encourages the heart of absolutely anyone out there who feels so stuck and so lost and so alone in the areas you're frustrated in. And like I always say, you are never alone, and that is why we so invite you into this friendship. And we are speaking from a place of, yes, celebration, but also a place of knowing what it's like to feel despair. And so we love you guys so much, and we are believing in your suddenly moment alongside you.
Okay, you guys, for this week's Love Notes, we didn't really have anything planned, so we're just going to give you some fun little life updates. Then we also wanted to do a little bit of a New Year's follow-up / check-in, because I feel like we're past that mid-year point, so it's just kind of fun to touch base and let you in on whether we are succeeding or struggling on some of our resolutions. So I'll let Brie kick it off with a little bit of a life update.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned it in this episode, but I have a boyfriend, which is so crazy.
So happy.
He's literally the best ever. And I can't wait to share the story with you guys. And I mentioned this to you very briefly, but I do honestly would see a point in time, probably later, farther along in our relationship, but I would love to have him on the podcast, because
I would love that.
Truly, for all my single girls out there, it is a beautiful story of so much just faithfulness on his end, of just the wait leading up to him meeting me. And I just feel like it could be a story of such encouragement for anyone who is single and they're waiting for their God story to be written. It really is something that I'm astonished by the blessing, and I would love for him to encourage my girls out there. Yeah. So yeah, that is probably one of my biggest updates.
Yeah, just a fun little update. It's actually the middle of the week right now, which I feel like we never really get to film. I was I want to go into the fall so refreshed. Felt like God was just saying I should take some time off. So taking some PTO this week, already feel like so renewed. It's crazy what even just like one day can do. But I'm going to be going down to San Diego the rest of this week, and I'm doing my first ever solo staycation, or like first ever solo trip, which is just wild that I've never done that before. I feel like just meeting my husband so early on, he's always been like my travel partner or with friends. And I just really felt like it was put on my heart where I was like, I think the Lord is just prompting me to spend some time with him, like uninterrupted quality time with God, which I've just been craving. And so I am like so looking forward to the fruits of that and just being like so intentional. And I think you've taught me even to just like love time by myself in a new way. I think I used to love being by myself as a way to like fill up my social battery, but now I'm learning to just like love spending time like doing things by myself and doing them with God. And it's so sweet that I feel like it was such an invitation of him of like, I want to spend quality time with you. Like, let's have this little trip together, which sounds funny,
so sweet.
But I'm just so excited.
That is going to be so special. I cannot wait for you. So yeah, I literally was just telling Marissa, I don't know why it just like randomly came to my mind, but I was like thinking of, you know, our episode where we talked about like our word for the year and our New Year's resolution. And maybe it is just because it's like that halfway point in the year. But I literally told Marissa, I was like, wow, I already know one of my failures that I said I would do for this year, but also one of my victories. And it's not a failure. It's just, you know, priorities shift and things change and you can change your mind. We've talked about that in episodes too. But I think what's so funny is that, I mean, I'm flipping my hand for anyone who's watching on YouTube or even on Spotify. I think our videos show up on Spotify. My word love that I have tattooed on my hand was my word for the year. And it's so crazy. And I'm also like thinking about this, just like sharing my most recent life update. It's so crazy that that was my word of the year. And yeah, now I'm a boyfriend. I don't know. It's so crazy to me.
Now she's falling in love.
I'm falling in love. God is just so intentional. Like he loves us, and he loves to like be really specific with us, which I think is such a treasure. But
yeah,
then I had a thought, like as I was reflecting on my word and how much like I love this tattoo even more now. But I know one of my goals for this year was to run 2 marathons this year. And that's just not happening for me. I mean, honestly, since my last marathon, I just haven't really been running very much. And that happened to me my last training cycle as well. But truly just with the rest of my year between traveling and just wanting to be here and be present, I just don't see that in the cards for me. I do see potentially doing another one in 2025, but also I had the thought of like, maybe I won't run another one. I mean, not ever. Yeah. I will run another one, but I don't know if I'll run another one next year either. So that was a little change of plans for my year.
It's honestly so good to be like adaptive in that. It's like, I was even reflecting on my New Year's resolutions, and it's like, there are some things where it's so beautiful that our perspective going into it, even though it's so prayerful, like there's still so much opportunity for change. Like we can't even anticipate what we're going to need in certain seasons. But something when I was looking at mine, a lot of it had to do with like such a desire to just pour in specifically to like my church community. And I was like, I just want to serve. I want to get so planted. Like, I just want to do this for people. And I talked about like having people over at our house more and like hosting a group and all of these things. This was before I had any concept of doing a job in ministry. Like that was not on my horizon whatsoever. So it's so cool to see that that was such a desire of my heart. And truly, like, I think I had like 5 bullet points related to that. And every single one of those has come true.
That's so
which is crazy.
Cool.
And it hasn't been, it's one of those things where it like effortlessly fell into place. It wasn't like, oh, we should have people over, like host a group. It just so organically happened. And so it's so neat that those were like desires God planted in my heart. And now to like reflect back and see when you dream with God and like write things down, it's so much fun to like see what what he shares with you and gives insight is just so much fun. So we encourage you guys, if you have any kind of resolutions, to just kind of like reflect and pray over them and give yourself so much grace. Like we shared, there are going to be things where we're like, okay, 2 marathons, maybe not.
Yeah.
And that's like so okay and so amazing to watch them change and evolve. But as always, we hope you guys enjoyed our little love notes and this episode, and we're just praying over your lives and your breakthrough, and we are so excited to see you in our next one. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. We pray this episode was encouraging and life-giving. If you found it valuable, please share it with a friend, leave a review, and subscribe.
And be sure to follow us along over on Instagram at With Love Always Podcast. Signing off with all of our love always, Bree
And Marissa.